So will Negan and Maggie be able to put their past demons behind them in order to save Hershel and escape Manhattan? Or are their emotions going to get the best of them? Here are my spoiler-filled thoughts on episodes 1 and 2 of The Walking Dead: Dead City. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Let's Talk Movies. I'm Brad, and first off, let me say I am really enjoying Dead City so far. I actually intended on making this video a couple days ago when I watched the episodes, but it's kind of given me a little bit of time to roll things around in my head, and I'm also in the middle of introducing my wife to the series, the original series, for the first time, and it's kind of cool. I'm kind of revisiting The Walking Dead from different places. I'm trying to catch up on Fear the Walking Dead. I'm also watching Dead City, which is set 5 years after the end of The Walking Dead, but I'm also kind of going back to its beginnings and where it all started. And the heart of that show, from the time that we were back on the farm and then to the prison. Right now, we're at the point where we're just starting to get involved with Andrea and the governor and kind of all of that that's going on. The heart of this show has always been the characters. And I was excited about Dead City because of the dynamic between Negan and Maggie in The Walking Dead post you-know-what. Because they're going to have to put their differences aside in order to save Hershel. They are going to have to go through this emotional journey together, and their relationship is unlike any other characters on this show. And we've had characters that have absolutely hated each other, but Negan has a true redemption arc, and Negan tried to redeem himself. He tried to do right by the people of Alexandria and Hilltop and the kingdom, and many would say that he was successful in doing so. Now, does that mean Maggie is just going to instantly forgive him and all is going to be well? No, there is a lot of pent-up rage, and as we saw on the boat as they were heading into Manhattan, there is a lot of pent-up emotion and pent-up anger that is kind of starting to resurface now that they're going on this journey together. I must say, I was wondering how Negan was going to tie into the show, and I really liked the Saviors tie-in with the Croat, and even the scene when Negan was discussing the Croat and how crazy and sick and twisted he was. It's like a Dr. Jekyll situation. He's just a psycho. And you really kind of get the idea that Negan was just trying to do what was right, even though, of course, Negan was wrong. And his way of life, everything that he did in the whole all-out war section of the show and everything that went on with the Saviors was wrong. But honestly, compared to some of these other villains we're seeing in the Walking Dead universe right now, Negan is kind of, and I know it's a lot because he did such terrible things, but Negan is kind of one of the lesser intense villains right now. We've seen some pretty sick, twisted stuff in this universe as of late, and it's kind of starting to ramp up the horror elements a little bit, which I like. Just from Negan's description of the Croat, we know that this guy is sick and twisted. We know by his henchmen, I forget what their name in the show is, but they have the spikes on their head where they're hitting walkers with their head, and they're doing, these sick things with walkers. They're throwing them off of buildings. One of the things that I love and that they're doing so well in Dead City is that they're using that concrete jungle New York City environment to make it feel claustrophobic, like you've got nowhere to go, but you've also got everywhere to go. But you've got to navigate walkers. They're really expanding the world very well. And we're kind of reaching a point now where civilization, in a sense, is starting to kind of come back into the fold. It's not like it was before, by any stretch of the imagination. There's not a society, but there are little clumps of communities like we're seeing with New Babylon and the New Babylon Federation, like we've seen with the Commonwealth and the CRM. There are different groups of people kind of scattered throughout the world, and I'm excited to see where we go with that with the Daryl Dixon series as well, because as Jenner said at the beginning of The Walking Dead in the season 1 finale, that the French were the last to hang on. I'm curious to see if we're going to see any of that, if we're going to get to experience that. Not that there's any French people still hanging on 15 years later or whenever the Daryl Dixon series is set to take place, but I'm intrigued to see kind of how different communities around the world, and even more so around the nation in the US, are kind of trying to rebuild the pieces of what we've lost for the last 15 years. It's interesting, again, as I go back through the older episodes of The Walking Dead, in those months and years right after the outbreak, it was almost, we were still kind of in every man for himself territory. Yes, you had places like Woodbury, and you had places like the Sanctuary and Alexandria, but they were kind of few and far between. Most people were still living out on the road, trying to find other people, trying to find supplies, trying to scavenge. We didn't have these big communities of people that were working together and trying to build a life and sustain something like we have now. Now we actually have groups of communities like we're seeing with Alexandria and the Commonwealth and Hilltop and New Babylon. And there are other communities kind of peppered throughout that are banding together and growing crops and having schools and entertainment. And they're trying to build back a piece of society. And of course, outside of those walls, outside of what's going on within those federations and communities, there's still the dead. There's still scavenging. There's still lawlessness. But there is some form of law and order trying to be put back into the mix of the world, and that's going to be very interesting moving forward, because as we've seen with the Commonwealth, and as we've seen just like in the Walking Dead World Beyond with the CRM, that doesn't always go well, because people tend to believe that their way is right, and these communities don't necessarily work well with each other. And in addition to that, seeing different landscapes like we're seeing with New York City and like we saw with Mexico in the earlier seasons of Fear the Walking Dead, seeing different places allows you to see how different people have responded and chosen to survive and had to survive these different environments, because again, we really only saw Georgia and Virginia and that kind of eastern part of the US in those earlier seasons of The Walking Dead, in World Beyond and things like that. So it's been kind of neat to see a different perspective on how things were handled. I loved Maggie's little blurb at the beginning about New York, how it was an epicenter for the virus, and it got out of control so quickly and so many people were infected. They were blowing the bridges and they were trying to contain the virus any way they could. It's cool to see how these other groups have adapted to being in New York City, because the zip lines across skyscrapers and the massive hordes of zombies on the ground, we don't necessarily see that all the time. We've seen them going through the woods, we've seen them going through the different communities, but nothing in that concrete jungle setting. And one of the coolest parts about Dead City, at least so far, is seeing how Negan and Maggie have to navigate that, because that's outside of their realm too. Neither of them have been around that a whole lot, at least what we've seen in the other shows. So it's been pretty cool to watch them navigate and learn going in and out of buildings, trying to stay above ground versus going on the ground where all the walkers are, trying to navigate the walkers falling off of buildings and being used as weapons. There's been a lot of really cool additions that we as Walking Dead fans and Negan and Maggie as characters have not necessarily gotten to experience within the universe before. And through that journey, Negan and Maggie are seeing a different side of each other than they ever have before. Like Maggie seeing Negan take on a father figure for this mute girl who lost her dad, who he really feels for and is trying to help. I mean, it's cool to kind of see them experience that, because it's kind of a baptism by fire thing. They've seen each other at their worst when they're trying to kill each other. And of course, I think back to the scene in Alexandria where Maggie goes to Negan's cell to kill him, and he's crying and begging her to kill him. And she sees it as more of a punishment to let Negan live than if she just bashed his brains in the cell for everything he's done. And I think it would be really interesting, and I've thought this from day one. As soon as the show was announced, I was like, man, it is going to be so cool for them to be forced to deal with this stuff in a way that they necessarily haven't before. I know they worked together in The Walking Dead, and I know that they had that kind of reconciliation moment in the series finale, but it's different when they're forced to work together. And I think of the zipline scene when Negan goes across the zipline between the two skyscrapers, and Maggie's going across and she gets stuck, and she won't let Negan help her. She won't let him in. And it goes back to him saying, "I'm shocked you're still seeing me as the bad guy." When he said to her, "How many husbands and fathers have you killed?" It was just like, yeah. I mean, you have to look at it from the perspective of, in this world, everybody is everyone's bad guy necessarily. That's kind of the way it is in that survival thing, because I'm not gonna lie, some of the things that Rick's group did probably more the good guy thing to do when we think back to the what ignited the all-out war segment of The Walking Dead prior to the section of the show. They didn't do everything really well either, and of course you have to make hard decisions in these survival stories, and I knew that the two of them being forced to work with each other and being forced to deal with some of these emotions that have been pent up for a long time would be a really cool thing to watch. I am interested to see what happens with the Marshal from New Babylon, because I think there is a big arc to be had for him. I assume that Negan and Maggie are going to have to work with him again at some point in the series, and they're going to work together to survive, and hopefully he will see that Negan at his heart does some bad things and can put on a show and can do some really, really awful things, but so can Maggie, so can he, so can all of these people in their effort to survive. And hopefully on this journey, he will let Negan live, and he will let Maggie live, and he will, do the right thing in not fulfilling his duties as a New Babylon Marshal. Now, finally, the Croat. I'm very intrigued by the Croat. Again, going back to Negan's speech and kind of how he described him as a very sinister person who can get under your skin. And we saw that in the interrogation with Hershel when he's sitting there talking to him, and he just has that creepy, soft-spoken voice and the personality of someone who is just not a good person at all. Evil, sinister, creepy. He gives off a very eerie persona, even at the end of episode 2 when he's killing the walkers with his head, and he takes the helmet off and he looks at him and says, we're going to take good care of you or whatever. It's the same type of thing that the governor had, but like times 10. Overall, I'm really enjoying what they're doing with Dead City. It's got this cinematic style that really these later few seasons of The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead and World Beyond and this promo for the new Daryl Dixon show have, that just seems so cinematic. And it almost reminds me some of the scenery that we've seen in Dead City so far of what they did with The Last of Us. Even though that's 20 years away, really, we're only 5 years away from where The Last of Us is at. When we catch up to the current Joel and Ellie story. So it's kind of crazy to think that The Walking Dead is getting that far into the apocalypse, because we think back, they were only 6 months or so after when Rick wakes up and things like that. I mean, it's kind of nuts to think that we've come that far. But again, if Dead City takes place 5 years after the end of The Walking Dead, we're about 15 years into the apocalypse now. So we're starting to get there. But please, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you watching The Walking Dead Dead City? Are you more excited for the Daryl Dixon show or for the Rick and Michonne Summit show? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Guys, as always, please be sure to leave this one a like. New episodes of our shows premiere every single week at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. I drop new videos every single Tuesday night at 8 o'clock p.m. We love you. Be good to each other. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at LTM Podcast KY. And we'll talk to you soon. Peace.